In America today, nearly 1 in 6 seniors is treated as a burden by their own family. Last month, I realized my dad was quietly becoming part of that statistic. And the worst part was, it was his own children making him feel that way. My name's Michael. I'm 34, living in Austin, Texas, working remote in IT. My dad, James, is 72. He's a retired carpenter, the kind of man who could measure a board just by looking at it. When I was a kid, I thought he could build anything. And in a way, he did. He built the little wood frame house we grew up in, but more than that, he built the life we had. He's been alone since Mom passed away 5 years ago. These days, his knees ache when he climbs stairs, and sometimes he forgets why he walked into a room, but he still bakes apple pies for the neighbors, still greets you at the door with a smile that makes you feel like the most important person in the world. I wish I could say I'd been the perfect son since Mom died. The truth is, I let my life get busy, deadlines, meetings, and the kind of excuses that sound reasonable until you realize they cost you moments you can't get back. I told myself Dad was doing fine, but in the quiet corners of my mind, I knew he wasn't. It hit me at my sister's birthday dinner, a family gathering we'd planned for weeks. Dad sat at the far end of the table, wearing his one good jacket, a little frayed at the cuffs. He didn't say much, just smiled when someone looked his way. I kept glancing at him between bites, wondering when he'd gotten so thin. After cake, my sister leaned in toward our brother and me. "We need to talk about Dad," she said. I thought maybe she meant checking in more, helping with groceries. But her next words were a slap in the face. "We can't keep checking on him every week. It's slowing us down." My brother nodded like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Assisted living will be easier for everyone." I looked from one to the other, waiting for someone to say they were joking. No one did. Dad just sat there fiddling with his coffee spoon, like he didn't hear them, or maybe like he'd heard worse in his head already. The rest of the table talk turned to weekend plans and work updates, as if they hadn't just tossed out the idea of moving our father out of the home he'd built with his own hands. I kept my mouth shut. Arguing right then would have been like throwing a pebble at a freight train. But something inside me was already shifting. After dinner, people hugged goodbye in the driveway. I was heading back to my car when I realized I'd left my jacket inside. I walked back in through the side door, just in time to hear my sister's voice from the kitchen. "Hi, this is Susan Miller. I'm checking about room availability. Yes, for my father, as soon as possible." She lowered her voice, but I heard the clink of a pen on paper. A nursing home's name. A deposit amount. It felt like the floor under me tilted. In that moment, Dad wasn't a person to her. He was a problem to move, a box to check off. If you've ever watched someone who gave you everything be treated like they're nothing, you know there's a moment when you stop being a bystander. You start planning. And I was already making my plan. I didn't sleep much after that night. I kept replaying my sister's voice in my head, the casual tone she used while talking about moving Dad. Like she was booking a table at a restaurant, not making a decision about the man who'd raised us. A few days later, she called for a family meeting at her place. She opened the door with a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. My brother was already there, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine. Dad was nowhere to be seen. I asked, "Where's Dad?" "He's fine," she said quickly, waving me toward the love seat. "This isn't about him being here. It's about figuring out what's best for him." "What's best for him?" I repeated. "Or what's easiest for you?" Her smile froze. My brother leaned forward. "Mike, don't start. You live your life, we live ours. We can't keep dropping everything to check in on him. He's had his life. We need to live ours. I stared at him, trying to process the coldness in those words. Had his life? I said. He's still alive. He still matters. My sister crossed her legs, looking at me like I was being naive. We're not villains here. Assisted living is clean, safe, and social. He'll have people around his age to talk to. He won't be alone. He's not alone, I said sharply. He has us. She let out a sigh, the kind people use when they think you just don't get it. Mike, you're being emotional. I laughed once, without humor. You're talking about our dad like he's a business project. You can't streamline him out of your life because it's inconvenient. Nobody spoke for a moment. The only sound was the faint hum of her fridge in the kitchen. Finally, my brother stood. Look, the deposit's already covered. We can visit him whenever we want. It's done. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. Covered? How? He glanced at my sister, then back at me. We used the joint account. The one Dad had opened years ago so we could help with his bills. My voice got quiet. Did you tell him? My sister looked away. My brother didn't answer. You didn't tell him, I said, louder this time. My sister set her wine glass down. Mike, stop acting like you're the only one who cares. We're preparing for the future. You should thank us. Thank you? For draining his account and making decisions behind his back? My voice was shaking now, and not from fear. They both started talking at once, a blur of justifications. Less stress. Financially smart. Safer for him. I tuned them out. In my head, I was already picturing Dad's small kitchen. The smell of pine from the old wood counters. The way he still wipes them down every night, like Mom's coming home any minute. I stood up. You two can do whatever you want with your own lives. But you don't get to decide his without him knowing. This conversation's over. As I walked to the door, my sister called after me. You're going to regret this. Maybe I would, but not half as much as I'd regret staying silent. A week later, my phone buzzed with an alert from the bank. Another withdrawal from Dad's joint account. This one labeled, Assessment Fee, Golden Pines Assisted Living. That wasn't just a deposit. That was the first step in moving him out. And suddenly, I realized this wasn't going to be an argument. It was going to be a fight. The day after that bank alert, I drove straight to Dad's house. His truck was in the driveway, but the front blinds were drawn. When I knocked, he called out, Come in, Mike. The place smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust, like always. Dad was at the kitchen table, sorting through a stack of old mail. His glasses were perched halfway down his nose. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Did you know there's been money coming out of your joint account? Big withdrawals? He frowned, looking genuinely confused. No, I only use that for the electric bill. Why? I slid my phone across the table, showing him the bank statement. His eyes moved slowly over the numbers. What's Golden Pines? It's a nursing home, I said. They've already put down a deposit. He let out a soft, almost embarrassed laugh. Well, maybe they think I'm getting too old to take care of myself. I leaned forward. Do you think you're too old? He shook his head, but there was a shadow in his eyes. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm just in the way. That sentence hit me like a punch. Dad, you are not in the way. You are the reason I have anything good in my life, and they have no right to make you feel like you're some broken appliance they need to get rid of. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. That night, I called my sister and brother. No pleasantries. You went behind his back. You took his money. This stops now. My brother's voice was flat. It's not your decision, Mike. You're acting like some hero. You don't even live here full time. I live 15 minutes away, I shot back. And I actually see him more than you do. Yeah, well, he said, you'll see him plenty at Golden Pines. Maybe you can even visit him every Sunday and pretend you're the perfect son. Something about his tone, smug, dismissive, lit me up inside. You're stealing from him. Stealing? He laughed. That's rich. It's his money. We're using it for his care. You think you're gonna swoop in and save him? You're not. You're just an ATM who thinks he's a saint. That word, ATM, hung in the air like smoke. You really see him like that, don't you? I said quietly. A machine, not a man. Silence on the line. Then my sister cut in, her voice clipped. We're done talking about this. The move is happening. If you want to help, fine. If not, step aside. Step aside? That's what you do when something's coming down the street that you can't stop. But I wasn't stepping aside. The next day, I went to the bank in person with Dad. We closed the joint account. I moved his remaining balance into a new one only he and I could access. I set up transaction alerts to my phone. As we left the bank, Dad stopped me on the sidewalk. You're making them angry, Mike. Good, I said. Maybe they'll think twice before they try to railroad you again. He looked at me for a long moment, like he wanted to say something, then just nodded. That weekend, my sister sent me a message. Enjoy playing guardian angel. You're going to burn out fast. Maybe she was right, but better to burn out than stand by while they stripped him of dignity. They thought the fight was about money. They didn't realize it was about something worth a whole lot more. By the time Sunday rolled around, I couldn't stop thinking about the look in Dad's eyes when he said he might be in the way. It wasn't self-pity. It was resignation. Like he'd already started packing his dignity away in some mental box. I drove over late in the afternoon, bringing a bag of groceries. Fresh bread, chicken soup, some of his favorite root beer. When I walked in, the kitchen light was dim, and Dad was sitting at the table again. This time, dinner was a single slice of dry bread and a bowl of soup so thin I could see the bottom. Dad, I said softly, why didn't you tell me you were out of food? He shrugged. Didn't want to be a bother. Those words again. I felt something in my chest tighten. You're never a bother to me. Never. I sat down across from him. You know they've already paid money to a nursing home, right? Without asking you. He gave a small nod, like he'd known all along, but hadn't wanted to say it. They think they're doing the right thing. Maybe they're right. I'm not as young as I used to be. I leaned forward. Dad, being older doesn't mean you stop mattering. It doesn't mean you give up your home, your life, just because someone else is impatient. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from decades of carpentry. Sometimes I think people only see me for what I used to be able to do. I stood up, walked over to the coat rack, and took down his old jacket. Pack your bags, I said. He looked up, startled. What? You're coming with me tonight. He chuckled, shaking his head. Mike, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because if I don't, they'll make this decision for you. And I'm not going to let that happen. For a moment, he just sat there, silent. Then I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Tears welling up in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but one slipped down his cheek. He whispered, I didn't think anyone would still want me around. That hit harder than anything my siblings had said. I knelt down so we were eye level. You're my father. You're the reason I am who I am. I want you with me. Always. He covered his face with one hand, his shoulders shaking. It wasn't grief this time. It was relief. When he finally stood, he moved slowly, went into his bedroom, and slid something from under the bed. It was a small canvas bag, already packed. A few shirts, a photo of Mom, his Bible. "You were ready?" I asked. He gave a sad smile. "I've been ready for a while. Just didn't know where I'd go." We loaded his things into my truck. As we pulled away from the house, I caught him looking back at it in the rearview mirror. His hand lifted slightly, like he was saying goodbye to more than just a building. I didn't say anything. I just drove, the hum of the road filling the silence between us. I knew the next call from my sister or brother wouldn't be friendly. I knew they'd accuse me of interfering, of taking sides. But when a man like my father starts to believe he's no longer worth keeping, someone has to remind him he is. And I had decided that someone was going to be me. It didn't take long for the phone calls to start. The first came the next morning, my sister's name flashing on the screen before I'd even had my coffee. The second I answered, she was already yelling, "You had no right to take him out of that house without talking to us!" I kept my voice even. "You had no right to drain his bank account and plan to move him without telling him." "This is family business, Michael," she snapped. "You don't get to play hero and betray your own blood." I almost laughed. "Betrayal! That's rich coming from the people who went behind his back." Before she could respond, my brother joined in on speakerphone. "We're going to court if we have to. You can't just move him in with you and take over everything. That's joint property. You're interfering with his estate." I walked over to my desk, pulled open a folder, and looked at the documents I'd found 2 nights before. "His estate? You mean the house and the savings account?" "Yes," my brother said flatly. "Well," I said, "you might want to check your facts before you start making threats. The house deed is still in Dad's name. So is the savings account. As long as he's of sound mind, which he is, you have zero legal authority to decide where he lives." Silence on the other end for a moment. Then my sister's voice, sharp. "We'll see about that." "I already did," I said. "County property records are public." I also talked to his bank manager. And I have paperwork from his doctor confirming he's mentally capable of making his own decisions. The line went dead. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 hours later, I got a text from my sister. "If you think you've won, think again," followed by a picture of a legal form, a petition for guardianship. They weren't just trying to move him now. They were trying to strip him of the right to make his own choices entirely. That night, I told Dad what they were doing. He sat in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, staring at the steam. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "Why would they do this?" "Because they think they can," I said, "and because they think you won't fight back." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then let's make sure they're wrong." The next day, I went back to his old house to get some of his things. In the bedroom closet, behind a row of flannel shirts, I found a small metal lockbox. Inside were old family photos, Mom's wedding ring, and a folded envelope. It was a letter, handwritten by Mom, dated years before she died. In it, she'd written that the house should remain in Dad's possession until his last day, and that she trusted me to make sure that happened. Tucked with it was a notarized copy of the original property deed. I stood there, holding that letter, the paper soft and worn, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about fighting my siblings anymore. This was about keeping a promise my mother had made and passed on to me. When I left the house, I locked the door and slipped the key into my pocket. The next time we all sat in the same room, they weren't going to be the only ones ready to play hardball. They wanted a family discussion at Dad's house, as if putting him back in his own living room would make their plan seem kinder. I agreed, but only on my terms. When I arrived, Dad was already there, sitting in his favorite armchair, looking like he'd been told to stay quiet and let the grown-ups handle things. My sister was at the dining table with a neat stack of papers. My brother sat beside her, arms crossed, eyes already defensive. I walked in carrying my own folder, and I wasn't alone. Beside me was Mr. Carlson, an elder law attorney I'd hired 2 days earlier. "Why is there a lawyer here?" my sister asked immediately. "Because we're making decisions about Dad's future," I said, "and I want to make sure we do it legally." She smirked. "Fine, then let's talk about the guardianship petition." She slid a form across the table toward me. "Once this is approved, we'll be able to make all his medical and financial decisions." "It's for his own good." I didn't even look at it. Instead, I opened my folder and laid out 3 documents: county property records, a bank statement, and a letter from Dad's doctor. "First," I said, tapping the property deed, "the house belongs entirely to Dad. There is no joint ownership. Second, the savings account is in his name alone. You two have no access anymore, thanks to your unauthorized withdrawals. Third, this is a statement from his physician confirming he is mentally competent. Which means a guardianship petition will go nowhere." My brother leaned back, scoffing. "We'll see what the court says." Mr. Carlson spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, but carried weight. "You won't get that far. 2 years ago, your father executed a durable power of attorney and a health care proxy, both naming Michael as his representative if needed. Those documents are legally binding." The color drained from my sister's face. "That's not all," I said, pulling out one last envelope. "You remember Mom's handwriting, right?" I slid the letter across the table, letting them read the words where she made her wishes clear. That Dad should live in this house until his final day, and that I was to protect that wish. Silence. My sister's eyes darted between the letter and the lawyer. My brother clenched his jaw. Mr. Carlson leaned forward slightly. "If you continue to interfere with your father's living arrangements, or attempt to access his finances without permission, you could be facing charges for elder financial abuse. That's a felony in this state." Dad shifted in his chair, his voice steady. "I've decided to stay with Michael. That's my choice, and it's final." It was the first time he'd spoken more than a sentence in one of these meetings. His tone left no room for debate. My sister shoved her papers into her bag. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. My brother stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. They both headed for the door without another word. The slam of the front door echoed through the house. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the old wall clock. I turned to Dad. "You okay?" He gave a small smile. "Better than I've felt in years." It wasn't just relief in his voice. It was something else. The quiet satisfaction of a man who'd just taken back control of his own life. And they didn't even realize the fight was truly over. The house felt different after they left. Not just quieter, lighter, like someone had opened a window and let years of tension drift out. Dad sat back in his chair, his hands resting on the worn arms, looking taller somehow. For a while, we just stayed there in the living room, no talking. Just the sound of the clock ticking and the faint creak of the floorboards when either of us shifted. Finally, Dad stood. "Wait here," he said, disappearing down the hallway toward his bedroom. When he came back, he was carrying something I hadn't seen before. A small wooden box, the surface worn smooth from years of handling. He set it gently on the coffee table between us. "What's this?" I asked. He sat down, running his fingers over the lid. "Your mother gave me this before she passed. told me to open it when I knew who really had my back. I felt my throat tighten. You never opened it? He shook his head. Not until now. The lid creaked as he lifted it. Inside was a thick envelope, a small leather-bound notebook, and a roll of bills held together with a faded rubber band. The envelope was heavy. When he handed it to me, I could feel stacks of cash inside. This, he said, is everything I've managed to save since I retired. Odd jobs, selling a few pieces of furniture I built, even some money from the VA. I kept it separate so no one could get their hands on it. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. It's not for me anymore. It's for you, for the son who didn't see me as a burden. I didn't know what to say. My hands shook as I set the envelope down and picked up the notebook. Inside were years of entries, dates, amounts, and names. I realized they were records of money he'd given to my sister and brother over the years. Car repairs, rent, temporary loans that were never paid back. Page after page, thousands of dollars, all gone without a single repayment. They always came to me when they were in trouble, Dad said quietly, and I never said no. I thought maybe if I helped enough, they'd see me as more than just an old man. But it didn't work. I flipped through until I reached the last page. It was dated only a week ago, and it had one entry. Michael, nothing owed. I closed the book and set it back in the box. My chest felt tight, but not from anger this time. From the weight of what he was really giving me. Not the money, but his trust. I don't need this, I said finally, pushing the envelope toward him. You do, he said firmly. Not for yourself, for whatever comes next. So you never have to choose between helping me and protecting yourself. We sat there for a long time after that, the box still open between us, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds. Out the window, I saw Mrs. Howard from across the street waving as she watered her flowers. Dad waved back, and for the first time in months, his smile looked like it used to. Steady, unforced, real. They had walked out earlier without looking back, but I knew Dad didn't need them to, because he had already decided who he could count on. And I had decided I would never make him doubt it again. It's been a few months since that last meeting, since my siblings walked out of Dad's house without so much as a glance back. I've run into them twice, once at the grocery store, once in the parking lot of the post office. Both times, the conversations were short and civil in the way strangers talk, not family. I'd be lying if I said that doesn't hurt a little. But if the cost of keeping my father's dignity is their silence, I can live with it. Life has fallen into a new rhythm. Every morning, I make coffee for both of us. Dad likes his black, piping hot, in the same chipped mug he's used for 20 years. I take mine with too much cream, the way he always teased me about. We sit on the back porch, watching the sun come up over the oak trees behind my apartment building. Sometimes we talk, about the neighbors, about the weather, about nothing at all. Sometimes we just sit in silence, and it's enough. He still bakes pies for the folks at church. I drive him to Sunday service, and afterward, we stop at the farmer's market to pick up fresh apples and whatever vegetables look best. He's slower now, and I match my steps to his without thinking about it. That used to make him self-conscious, but lately, I've noticed he doesn't apologize for it anymore. The box he gave me sits on the top shelf of my closet. I haven't touched the cash. I haven't needed to. But some nights, when the apartment is quiet, I take down the leather-bound notebook and read through the entries. It's not about the money. It's about understanding the years he spent quietly giving, hoping it would be enough for someone to see his worth. I think about all the times he must have handed over bills to my siblings without hesitation, maybe even with a smile, only to be repaid with distance and impatience. And I think about how easy it is to take someone for granted when you've known them your whole life, to see the sacrifices without really seeing the person making them. One afternoon, I asked him why he never said no. He shrugged and said, "Because your mother would have said yes, and I couldn't stand the thought of letting her down." That answer told me everything about who my father is. We talk sometimes about the future. I know there will come a day when he'll need more care than I can give on my own. But we've agreed that we'll make that decision together when the time comes. Not in secret, not with papers signed behind closed doors. And never because it's simply easier for someone else. What I've learned through all of this is that honoring your parents isn't about grand gestures or picture-perfect holidays. It's about standing in the gap when everyone else walks away. It's about making sure they know their life still has value, even if they can't work the way they used to, even if they move a little slower, or forget where they put their glasses. I've also learned that the line between love and convenience is thinner than we think. Some people will cross it without hesitation if it means avoiding discomfort, and when they do, the damage is deeper than any financial loss. It's the quiet erosion of someone's sense of belonging. Dad told me once that when he was a boy, his father used to say, "The way you treat the people who raised you is the way your children will treat you." I didn't think much about it when I was younger. Now, I can't stop thinking about it. One day, the roles will reverse. We'll be the ones moving slower, needing help with groceries, forgetting what day it is. And someone will decide whether to stand by us or make excuses. I know which side of that choice I want to be on. So here's what I'll leave you with. If the people who raised you needed you tomorrow, not when it's convenient, not when it fits your schedule, but tomorrow, would you show up? Would you carry their bags? Sit with them through a long afternoon? Remind them they still matter? Or would you tell yourself they've had their life and look for the fastest way to make them someone else's responsibility? Because the truth is, the answer to that question says more about who we are than almost anything else. And I've decided that for me, it's a promise I'll keep for as long as my father needs me. And maybe even after that.